Digital acceleration is here. Health systems are walking the path, but are they in the right direction? Welcome to Patient Journey Pioneers, roadmaps from the top digital leaders in healthcare, who share insights and strategies that are pushing the patient journey to new heights. This podcast is brought to you by Hyro, and I'm your host, Liat Kozuch. Great. I want to welcome everyone back to another episode of Patient Journey Pioneers. And today will be pioneered by Sarah Richardson, who usually doesn't really need an intro these days because everyone knows her in healthcare. But for those who don't, she's the president of the E29 Executive Development Community. And prior to her role at This Week Health, which is where she is now, Sarah served as the SVP for Tivity Health and VP of IT Change Leadership for Optum Care. Did I get all of that in? I know you have a lot more to share, Sarah, but did I miss anything?
Hey, good enough for now. I would say if you go more than 10 years back, it's past the limit. So that's perfect.
Well, perfect timing, because I actually do want to start by giving the audience kind of your timeline of what brought you to where you are today. So if you could just walk us through your journey in healthcare, how it all started and what you're doing today.
Absolutely. I believe what I'm most proud of, Leah, and which is such a neat thing to be able to share with people, is that I'm finally doing everything I've ever done in my career that I wanted to do. I'm finally doing it in one place. And that's not always true. A lot of times we just have all these fractional components of our careers and the things that we're invested in personally and professionally that we make time for. In this instance, it's all here in one place. It still does allow me to do some of my board advisory and volunteer work, but it used to be that I was always looking to, host events with Bill or do interviews or teach classes for other organizations. And it had to be added into the full-time CIO role. And I kept thinking, gosh, if I could do this part full-time, how amazing would it be? I'm a big fan of if you put something out into the universe and you manifest it appropriately, it does come to you in different formats. You just have to know when you recognize it to harness that. That's how I got into healthcare. Overall, I started out in the casino hotel business in Vegas. That's where I went to school. Loved it, opened 4 casinos and an airline. But guess what? That airline went bankrupt. And I was in grad school at the same time. One of my study buddies was friends with the CIO at the county hospital. Rest essentially is history. County hospital, which I loved, which was a UMC in Las Vegas, and Trauma One Academic Medical Center. Talk about a place to learn healthcare. After that, everything just made sense. I went to HCA for a decade, went to Florida for a little bit, then went to LA, where I got to be with healthcare partners, DaVita Medical Group, Optum, all in one acquisition after another, found Tivity, and then with Bill. So really just constant iterations of myself. And then honestly, at that time in my life as well, I moved a lot. I went from Las Vegas to Nashville to Kansas City to Florida to LA, back up to the Bay Area. A lot of movement, a lot of opportunities. And I've stayed in healthcare for 24 of my 30 years in IT. So that purpose-driven perspective of being able to make things better for the right reasons, always worth it to me every day. So thank you for allowing me to share that journey.
Wow, thank you. And for all those tips, I always want to learn how to actually manifest into my life and not just dream about things. So you could probably write a book about what it means to be a CIO. What is something that like back then CIOs didn't have to deal with that they're dealing with now? How has the CIO role evolved in your opinion?
So when I started in IT and even in healthcare, we were technologists. All 5 years at the county hospital, even as I got promoted and moved through the ranks and got more and more responsibility, I was known as the phone girl. And I was never offended by that because that meant that they knew they could count on me because it worked. And there was a special love, like all of us that went into IT for the most part, we were the technologists. We wrote the interfaces, we built the scripts, we built the systems, we crawled around and connected J boxes and built cables and did all of those nerdy things and loved it. I loved that I knew that if that was my responsibility, it was going to work and it was going to work really, really well. And I had done it in the casinos. I'd opened all those big casinos and had crawled through the ducts and had programmed all of these systems and put repeaters in place, all the goofy stuff. What became more and more evident over time, especially because of HIPAA and because of meaningful use and these different initiatives that really were coming into place, was you had to learn the perspectives of the users. So learning clinical workflow became a huge win. Understand the business of healthcare, of how we made money and how we lost money and how we dealt with bad debt or how we dealt with indigent care or how we handled, duals and SNPs and all these different aspects of health plans. The longer you're in it, the more that you lead it, you have to understand how the business and operations and the finances function and all the politics that go with that. As an example, The county hospital was run by the county commissioners. That was our board. And so getting those insights early was really, really key. I'm grateful I learned it in my 20s because it is carried forward everywhere. So now, as a CIO, you need to appreciate and understand the technology. You're not typically still the technologist. You are now the strategist, the operator, the leader of all that integration in terms of technology enabling the business, enabling the things that we had talked about. So you become almost like a mini COO or CEO in those domains. And if you embrace all of those aspects appropriately, you get to really be one of the core components of what makes an organization succeed or fail. So guess what? With all the cyber aspects that we have today and all the ways that things can break or go wrong, you're equally responsible for how things go right, but you really got to have amazing ironclad plans to know what to do when things don't go as intended as well.
Interesting you mentioned that because on our virtual summit coming up in September, which we're excited to have you also, I don't even know which session I want to put you in because I kind of want you everywhere. We're going to be talking about the pitfalls to avoid, but you really have to try and embark on new projects in technology and embracing new technology into healthcare and into the organization to learn. So there's going to be a session all around, how to avoid the pitfalls. Let's take a step into Tivity Health. So what were some of the key digital health initiatives that you're especially proud of? How do you reflect on those looking back?
It's only been a couple months since I moved on, and I left on fantastic terms. So what's really important, I'm a fan of creating your own next opportunities so that when you leave an organization, not only do you leave it better than you found it, you also leave with all those relationships intact and in a healthy environment. So one of the stories I love to tell truly is not even about the technology, which was significant there. It was about, I'd been there about 6 weeks, and I called one of my just truly close friends and colleagues over a periods of time named Beth Cooper, and she was at Cerner at the time. I said, hey, I landed at Tivity, and these are the things that I'm going to need going forward. Do you want to come be on this team? And here's the title and the role. And as much as I have figured out in 6 weeks, all I can promise you is that you are my succession plan and you get first right of refusal, meaning if you don't want to come here, it does not change our relationship. So, grace of the heavens, not only did she say yes, we did amazing things there together with a whole slew of other players in the mix. You can't ever say it was two humans. It wasn't. And when I did leave, she did get promoted. So she is now the chief there, which I love because that shows that when you're intentional about the people, about the process, about the technology, about truly your succession planning and making sure that person has a voice, that she gets to go present to executive council. She gets to talk to the board as well. It doesn't have to be about me all the time. You need those people, even if I had planned to stay a couple of years, because if I had planned to stay, her chief opportunity would have been somewhere else. That was also part of our conversation. At the 3-year mark, if you don't replace me, where are you going? And to me, that's just an important precedent to set. Now, do we also get to do like super amazing things like go from 2 on-prem data centers to cloud native AWS hosted environments that completely transition our infrastructure into those services and serverless architecture, infrastructure as code, and really being able to define, provision, and manage that space using code. It's consistency, scalability, efficiency. It's safer environment. It increased our operational agility, it reduced cost, it improved our ability to innovate rapidly. And that was done with a sea of other individuals who made all of those things possible. So it was like throwing the best party you've ever had. It was really tough a lot of the time, hard decisions had to be made. But Tivity is now poised to be a version of itself it's never been before. And we reduced the cost of IT by over 50% in doing that, while multiplying literally exponentially its capability to be competitive in the marketplace. So those are the kinds of things that make it worth it every day. And something I'll always carry with me as a hallmark of my time at Tivity.
When you were going into Tivity Health, what was a goal that you had set for yourself that other CIOs tuning in can also learn from? And looking back, how well did you do reaching that goal?
I love to always think about what I could have done better. And I have to have people remind me of what went well in the first place because I'm always striving for, okay, but now what? Okay, but now what? Okay, what next? I'm good now, but also remembering to celebrate the milestones along the way because if you wait for the big thing to be done, you'll forget about the journey on the way there. When I went into Tivity, it was very specific. I was interviewing with a few different organizations. What struck me about them was twofold. A, that they were dedicated to senior wellness. And I'm a fan of seniors because underrepresented or under or start over. Underrepresented populations, elderly children, people with chronic conditions, they need an advocate, they need a voice. And Tivity is focused on living a longer, healthier, happier, independent life. Like, who doesn't want to be a part of that? And so if we can create the ability, so there's this opportunity to get into our ecosystem and utilize your gym network and have these functions and activities that you get to be that whole version of yourself is pretty special. So that was key. I want to learn that whole business of Medicare Advantage supplemental benefits and what it means to have these relationships with the health plans, because we were B to C essentially. We weren't, or B to B, we weren't B to C. And you don't get to sell directly no matter how great your product is. You have to sell into health plans. So learning that whole environment, just a whole other aspect of healthcare that I hadn't learned, was really, really important. Relationships were really key. And I'll be honest, I had not run a primarily software development shop before. I always been in hospitals or in primary care and specialty care environments. So to no longer be providing direct patient care, but having an adjacency that was really instrumental in how those patients, which to us were members, could show up when they were in a sick version of themselves versus a well version of themselves, also fascinating to me. So one more piece of the healthcare puzzle. So I went from big fortune companies to a relatively small organization to have those experiences, to report directly to the CEO, to know that my next role would be not CIO. I want to move towards a COO, CEO, president type of role. So all of those things being true, and there's always lessons learned along the way, but I'm grateful that I took that chance because it was worth it.
And look at you now. You got to be president at 229. So tell us a bit about that. Kind of what made you decide to move from Tivity Health and to work with Bill, even though I'd work with Bill any day. I'm sure it's a party over there, but what kind of made you decide to make that move? And what does your role entail today?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because I've known Bill for a long time, probably 6 or 7 years. He was actually a guest on my podcast when I was doing the one for SoCal Hymns back in like 2018, I believe it was. And I had Bill and Drex, who's my partner with Cyber and Risk at 229. He was on my podcast as well. So there was this whole group of us that were really getting our podcast chops going at that point. And then he kept expanding 229. He started hosting summits and doing interviews in action and doing town hall interviews. And of course, I was like, yes, 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 yes. Always want to be a part of it because I love, for lack of a better term, evangelizing what we do in healthcare and IT, how you can make it better, because we are all patients. That's what it always comes down to. What experience do you want when you're a patient? And I'm honestly not feeling great. So got to make it easy, because the hardest times in your lives need to be easy to navigate. Still working on that. Probably will be a lifelong goal in HIT. We just kept talking and kept ideating about what it could look like. And I remember being in the car driving from a meeting to another and having a chance to catch up with Bill. And it was a meeting that had not gone as well as I wanted it to. And he says, "Why don't you just come join me full time?" And I was like, "Seriously?" He's like, "I'm serious." I was like, "Okay, let me think about it." Because I didn't know he was serious. There was that moment when you're like, really? Within 2 weeks, we had agreed that would be the right thing to do, but I still had a timeline. I had some things I need to finish at Tivity. So I said, if we make it real, it can't be until May 1st. And so there it happened. So I believe we probably always knew that could be a true statement. It finally made itself available by a lot of things aligning at the right time. And now I get to lead city tour dinners and meetups and CIO summits and do podcasts and produce content and write articles. And truly, the name of my podcast is Flourish. Help people flourish wherever they are in their careers. And being able to serve one to many is such an opportunity that I could not be more grateful to have in front of me today.
I feel like you're serving as a lighthouse now for the community after everything that you have under your belt. You have this experience, you have this expertise, and I believe that that meeting that went wrong, which I'm kind of curious to know what went wrong in that meeting, or what didn't you get out of it that you wish you had gotten out of it. I mean, that led to where you are now. Was it just a frustrating experience professionally, or?
I would call it more of a tea leaf experience. Like, there's moments, and here's the deal I'll share with you. And I tell people I'm gonna be 50 in July, and I finally trust my
For
intuition.
those who can't see her, you wouldn't believe that. Continue.
I finally trust my intuition more than I used to, because when I go back and I say, was my intuition correct about something? And it was, but I went with what I thought should be true instead. I now trust my intuition. And there were just some variables that aligned that I thought, you know what? It's be a good time for me to take this opportunity. And I did. And so he and I were really thoughtful about all of that. And that's why it's important. It's not like you say, oh, I had a crummy day, I'm going to go work for Bill. It's like, hey, here's some indicators in the universe that tell me it's time to be thinking about something different. And guess what? Bill's a trusted advisor and a friend on top of being someone who has his own organization. And when I shared with him my perspectives, that's when his intuition also kicked in. So it wasn't something that was pre-planned. It was more like predestined to, like the Star Wars fan that I am. That's all those elements that went into it. So it wasn't the next day I turned around and gave my notice. I mean, I didn't give my notice truly until almost 3 months later. So we had to be really honest about, hey, what does it mean when you work together full time versus just meet up at events and have a fun? Because in order for a company to be successful, I mean, especially when you're net new in an organization, and I went from companies with hundreds of thousands of people to a few hundred, well, there's 12 of us at This Week Health. So you do everything with everybody, whatever it takes to make it work. And that's how I'm wired. So it's been the right decision.
You row the boat together, and I
We
believe this,
do.
yeah, and I believe the stars aligned for you, and you felt it kind of in your gut. And Bill's just really such a nice guy. So shout out to Bill. And I'm happy that you guys are together. And what's very unique about what you are building now is that you both have very dense CIO experience. So again, you two are serving as lighthouses for the community. And I admire you guys. Like I spoke with Jairus. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Paris. Yeah.
Jairus. Okay. I have a hard name too, so I know what it is. But I just was very much in awe of the passion that is behind what you guys do and the togetherness that you guys cultivate at your events. And as an event producer at Hyro, that's like inspiration for me. So keep it up.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
We can't leave out Drex DeFord because Drex joined just before I did. We did the math. Drex, Bill, and I have 68 years of healthcare experience. Am I crazy? I'm
that's
like, can we market it like that? Is that a good sound or
that's
like,
I think it's nothing like the experience and wisdom that comes with
we
that.
say over 50 years? That's kind of our internal joke, but 68 years. That's just in healthcare. You throw in some IT, we're at almost 100 years of experience, which is kind of crazy.
I'm sure you hear CIOs nonstop interviews, town halls, summits, meetups. What are some biggest challenges you're hearing them come across nowadays? And how are you seeing some teams overcome them in healthcare?
Yes. So you bring up such an amazing perspective about the world we live in today. We are all passionately curious about what's happening in the industry and with our peers and connections and our partners. So we read articles every day, all day in the evenings. We're always sending them in to our own engine. So if you sign up with This Week Health, you go to our website, you'll get that daily news feed and you'll hear about the things that are happening. You'll hear Bill talk about those things. And that's what we interview people about because there are significant challenges for healthcare CIOs today. Most prevalently, cybersecurity threats. When you think about ransomware attacks and why they're a prime target due to the sensitive nature of the data they handle, that's a big deal. Data breaches, same thing, protecting your patient data. The advanced security measures that need to be in place for that to happen is expensive. And so these advanced technologies that can be, whether it's AI driven threat detection or multi-factor authentication, which should be on all of your systems, by the way. Please have 2MFA out there, and encryption and the employee training. Drex made a really good point in one of his 2-minute drills recently that the bad guys are not hacking in, they are logging in because they're able to socially engineer their way into systems through humans. So it's very rare that a breach or a hack is happening because there was a threat vulnerability left open on a system. That could be true. It opens the door because, now I'm going to go get your credentials and I'm a deep fake my way in to saying that I'm you. It's amazing social engineering, how prevalent it is. And yet 20 or more years ago, I read books by a gentleman named Kevin Mitnick, who's everyone in the cyber world knows about. He started out with basic social engineering. And without being a complete creeper, if you just talk to people and ask them questions, you'd be amazed at how much you could find out that lends itself to that identity of somebody. And I think it used to be asking questions. People post everything out on public sites now. I mean, just think about how prevalent, how much you can learn about people just by looking at some of their social profiles. I am not a hacker. However, I'm always really careful about what's out there. Other key things that they think about data interoperability and just having so many fragmented systems and the standardization that's required. App rationalization is a big deal for a lot of these organizations. And I'll do a shout out to one of my dear friends. Her name is Leah Miller. She works at Common Spirit. She's over data and their applications. And she has like 2,400 applications in her ecosystem. And she talks about how they constantly do drills and they're constantly aware of what's happening with those environments. And you can only get to so many applications in a given portfolio, but if you still have 2,400, what is the hygiene and the governance, the awareness and the formulas that you're using to keep those environments as safe as possible? So those are places where I see it working well. And you got regulatory, you got compliance, you've got the patient experience, you've got the clinician burnout issues in front of you. You've got, is telehealth really going to be a way that you have better access to care? And it's a loss leader that then feeds some of your specialties. Like, think about strategic investments in technology, your staff training, your process improvement, all the things that CIOs are doing to be more secure, efficient, and patient-centered in healthcare. Those are all key elements. You wear all those hats as a CIO. And so having an environment where you can do it, but also having a place you can come talk about it and learn and grow from it, that's what we created at This Week Health. And I'll even throw a shout out to you guys. Hyro has created solutions that have significantly reduced workflow burden in different aspects of the healthcare continuum, and your customers love you. And I wasn't one of them, but every time I went by your booth or I saw Michael or I saw others at events, I go to your focus groups, I go talk to people because Hyro keeps building on the problems that they're hearing and providing real solutions. That's what every CIO needs. Their partners listening and paying attention to solve problems that are easy to implement, easy to maintain, and don't break the bank in doing so.
Events are you guys going to? Just wondering where we'd see you next besides the 229 event.
Sure, we love to do meetups at the big events. So UGM, HIMSS, Health, Vive, those are the places you'll see us do a meetup. What we do is we'll pick a space at a restaurant and we'll carve out, a happy hour environment that's not competitive to the agendas that are already out there, and get a whole bunch of people to show up and just be together. We do city tour dinners now. So we are going to be in Long Beach, Kansas City, Dallas, Miami, Tampa, Denver, and St. Louis this year. We've already done Philly and Nashville. We're adding more next year. Continue to create environments where if you can't do a 2.5-day summit, you can probably do a dinner. If you can't do either of those because of your schedule, because you have to go to these other big events, guess what? We have that meetup environment. And we're going to start education programs next year as well. Really deep dives into topics, like a couple of days of like, hey, you want to learn healthcare finance? We're going to teach it with CFOs from the business, from healthcare systems, from health plans. So you get that absolute perspective of everything it takes to really understand procurement and contracting and all of the elements that go into having a robust and healthy IT financial environment in your healthcare systems. So that's just some of the ways to get involved with us.
I love that. I love that, bringing real case studies from the
Oh,
people
yeah.
from the trenches
Yes.
and how to apply that back to your organization. I love that. I think what you guys are doing is very it's priceless for people looking just to have that one place to get all the info and content and education. Sarah, moving on to our fun speed round. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
I'm gonna say one word or phrase, and you're gonna tell me what comes to mind in a few words. Sounds good?
A game show portion.
It's a game show portion. In one word, how would you describe the future of digital health?
I would, in one word, the future of digital health is transformative.
Explain.
There has never been more innovation, rapid development, and ability to use advanced technologies to solve problems like we're seeing today. What's going to be the hardest part is continuing to determine who has chops to stay in the game versus who just has great ideas that need to be fostered more appropriately. I just think about something like telehealth, the widespread adoption of that and advancement of technologies revolutionize the way that patients access and receive healthcare. So I truly believe that while telehealth has been around, the transformation it continues to bring in terms of access and equity to the populations that need it the most, and the ability to layer in advanced technologies like clinical decision support, like the AI generated notes, and even looking for some of the diagnosis opportunities that still require two people to work together to make that happen, patient, provider, or clinician otherwise. All of these amazing components come together. Humans are still going to be at the center of it. What I say about automation all the time is you need to know where the human goes. And then the rest of it starts to make sense as well.
That brings me to, and we're still in our speed round, but I'm just going to take a segue real quick to the importance of human-centered design in healthcare. So I know you've mentioned this in the past, and this is very much your approach. Can you share an example of how this human-centered design in healthcare approach led to improved patient outcomes or any operational efficiency that you've seen firsthand?
Yes, when I think about even your question about what does it mean to be a patient journey pioneer, when I think about a comprehensive approach to how patients interact with healthcare services, whether that's your initial contact all the way through treatment and follow-up, if you have patient-centered care, then you're focusing on the entire continuum of care and knowing that every touch point in that patient's journey is optimized for their comfort, for their convenience, and for their well-being. Here's the other piece that needs to be true: prioritizing empathy and understanding of the patient's needs, the patient's preferences, and the emotions throughout their experience. That includes the family's experience, because pretty often, if you have a chronic condition or you have a hospitalization, whatever you're going through, your family will be involved in your care. That needs to be easy for the family to navigate. And so, full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board for a company called Otis Health. That's what they do. The family gets to be a part of the care navigation and the care journey. And that's more important than ever. I went through a terminal illness with my parent, with my mom, and we would say with a parent, my mother. And if I didn't have the background I did, I have no idea how she would have been able to manage that scenario and have the end of life experience as positive as it possibly could have been, even though it was a really crummy diagnosis.
It's like navigating the craziest seas of life in your most vulnerable moments, and yet it's so difficult
Hard to do it. I
in
mean, as even as a new
2024.
mom, you probably experienced like some things should have been easier than they were. And some things should have been, maybe harder than expected in
Yeah, and
retrospect.
I should have been handheld in some situations where I was not, and there should have been more awareness around this topic more than that topic. And so, absolutely. And so, I love your approach to, designing healthcare that way because it really puts the patient firsthand and at utmost of your consciousness when you're making decisions, even around vendors, which is something I wanted to ask you as well. What helps a CIO sift through the millions of options out there of tools, technologies, vendors, third parties?
That's where you utilize your network. That's why I give a plug to ourselves, This Week Health. We are partnered with a whole bunch of amazing organizations that want to know our network. And we do it thoughtfully. If we don't like say, hey, I'm going to introduce you to so and so. It's like, we're going to be hosting an event. Do you want to be a sponsor? We create these really boutique luxury experiences that allow you to have FaceTime with person in 15-to-1 example. There's like 6 partners, 15 CIOs in a room for 2.5 days. You get all that one-on-one time, and versus trying to avoid somebody at the big booth, which they have their place, but I don't believe you're going to meet your next meaningful connection at a booth. And I'll do a shout out to one of my dear friends. His name is Raj Toledi. He's currently the CEO and founder of Andor. Andor's like his 5th company. He did HealthGrid and Patient Point and Galvanon and Cytura before all of that. But here's how I got to know Raj: was HealthGrid was nascent. It was just coming out. And someone said, hey, this could be an option for us at our facility. Go have dinner with their team. They turned out to literally be like a blind, introduction, the nicest, most knowledgeable, friendly group of humans that I've had the pleasure of knowing for over a decade now. If I have questions about technology, if I have questions about things happening, I can call Raj. 2 reasons. He's a serial entrepreneur with incredible success. He will also introduce you to his friends warmly. How many CEOs will take calls from their customers to hear what's working and what's not working, go on site to meet with them, and then say, there's another problem that you have. I don't solve that. These guys do. And then introduce you to that CEO. But those are the kinds of relationships when you take time to get your head out of your own health system and go to different events and be curious and learn, you'd be amazed at the power of what one connection can lead to. So foster the relationships of people you trust. They will help you find the right answers.
Okay, continuing with our speed round. In one word, how would you describe AI in healthcare today?
Promising.
Hmm. Not just because you love Hyro, right?
Not just because I love Hyro, because it's everywhere, and for people to navigate that environment to really get a sense for what is true, what isn't true. And by the way, there's 9 or 10 versions of AI. Most people are already using it. if you've got chatbots, if you have robotic process automation, if you have clinical decision support, if you have things that are doing natural language processing and on, you're already using it. So what creates the most energy right now is a lot about the chat GPT versions of what does this generative AI mean for all of us. Here's the deal. Be curious, lean in, learn all you can, have governance structures in place, talk to a whole bunch of people. Who's doing it? Who's on the cutting edge? Who's lagging behind? Who's in the middle? Who are the big partners that you can trust that are delivering results? But even most recently, NVIDIA, there was $50 billion of investment in AI this last year with $3 billion in revenue produced from that. That equation is not sustainable. That starts to remind me of the days of the telecom booms and the dark fiber that was put in place that really busted on round one, but then we used all that dark fiber to power the internet a few years later. So all the plumbing that's going in place today, all these large language models, all this information, data sources that are being cleansed that you can trust so that the bias and or some of the other aspects have been removed as best to their capabilities. Pay attention to it. It's here, it's not leaving. How do you actually start to utilize it in a way that becomes more mainstream? But if I was a CIO, I'd be carrying around a deck of knowledge and information that I could literally share with anybody at any time that I'm probably supplementing daily as I learn new information. So it's here to stay. And what do you want to do about it?
This podcast is called Patient Journey Pioneers. What does being a patient journey pioneer mean to you, Sarah?
I love that question because I feel it goes back to patient-centered solutions and really understanding what it means to be a patient in a given moment, to be a provider or part of that family journey, but also understanding how technology can be your friend. So the innovation and technology aspects we touched on, they're really, really key. There's digital health solutions, there's personalization of those apps. How do you have seamless communication and coordination? How do you have engagement in wellness versus sickness? And is it easy to do business with you? Oh, convenience and accessibility. Can I get an appointment? Do I understand how much my bill costs? Is it easy to pay my bill? And I say all that because even in our household, disputed charge has taken like a year to work through for a couple of x-rays. Fascinating. And we know how healthcare works in this household and still like almost fighting with our local hospital to be like, your billing system is really messed up. Let me help you out with that. Um, the cultural competence and inclusivity. I live in an environment that has a heavy Latino population, and the way that they receive healthcare and want families to be involved, very different. So I have those conversations with my neighbors and my friends a lot because how do you make sure that competent care respects and addresses diverse backgrounds and that it's equitable and removes the barriers to care for different populations? But I think about also, if you're really going to have that patient journey pioneer perspective, knowing again about the telehealth expansion opportunities, thinking about how we utilize patient portals, thinking about how we use AI-driven personalized medicine, what other mobile health apps are complementary in our lives that keep us healthier, or hey, you're going to be sick in 2 days, maybe you should be talking to your doctor. And again, this will go down to the part that I believe is most important is what is your navigation of care through your journey of wellness and sickness so that you have trusted individuals in your ecosystem that can help you do the right thing for you and your family at the right time.
Wow. Well, thank you for being a patient journey pioneer because it
Yeah.
truly feels like when everything that you do and every piece of advice that you give to your peers in the space who are holding very meaningful roles in healthcare, you put yourself really in the place of the patient because, as you said, we are all patients. So thank you for being a lighthouse, which is just a term that came to mind when I got to know you, and we know each other also for a few weeks now, and I just see you as a lighthouse in 229 and all of the friends there. So thank you all for being lighthouses in healthcare, and hopefully here's to a better future for patients out there in their most vulnerable moments. That said, thank you, Sarah, for your time. This was awesome. We definitely need a part two because there's so many topics you can speak to. So we'll see you at our virtual summit as well, where you'll be speaking, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you. Working with you is an absolute lighthouse moment as well. It's just a joy, and you always love doing business with people that you like.
Thank you for listening to Patient Journey Pioneers, brought to you by Hyro. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening platform. See you on our next episode.